Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We have a new chapter today, chapter 15, Reality and the Integral Knowledge.
We are now, Sriyamda has gone into the Book 2, Part 2. Okay? So, the knowledge and the spiritual evolution. He has told us what are the boundaries of the ignorance. Then in the next chapter he has told us what are the field of the origin of falsehood and evil. And now this Part 2 is how to get out of this ignorance and this field of evil and suffering. So this was the knowledge and the spiritual evolution. What is meant by knowledge and what is the spiritual evolution? From where are we starting? Where are we ending? That's the Part 2, the last part, Book 2, Part 2, last. So we'll start reading. The first 3 paragraphs of this chapter is a summarizing. He summarizes everything that he has told us and then he will proceed. Okay, so reality and integral knowledge. Remember that the reality is not to be found here. It is to be found only when you rise to the highest level of the Purushottama level or the Ishvara level, the supramental level. Then from that height, you can see the reality here. But if you are here, your consciousness is here, even in the spiritual fields, you will not be able to see the reality. So the reality can be seen only there. So what is that reality and what is the knowledge that can give you the sense of that reality? That's the chapter. This self is to be won by the truth and by an integral knowledge. He will explain to us what is the integral knowledge. Hear how thou shalt know me in my totality. For even the seekers who have achieved, hardly one knows me in all the truth of my being. If you rise to the spiritual levels of consciousness, you have knowledge, but you don't have the integral knowledge. The integral knowledge is even higher up, the 3rd level. Okay, so now we read the text. This then is the origin, this the nature, these the boundaries of the ignorance. Its origin is a limitation of knowledge, its distinctive character a separation of the being from its own integrality and entire reality. Its boundaries are determined by this separative development of the consciousness, for it shuts us to our true self and to the true self and whole nature of things. For it shuts us to our true self and to the true self and the whole nature of things and obliges us to live in an apparent surface existence. A return or a progress to integrality, a disappearance of the limitation, a breaking down of separativeness, an overpassing of boundaries, a recovery of our essential and whole reality must be the sign and opposite character of the inner turn towards knowledge. There must be a replacement of a limited and separative by an essential and integral consciousness identified with the original truth and the whole truth of self and existence. The integral knowledge is something that is already there in the integral reality. It is not a new or still non-existent thing that has to be created, acquired, learned, invented, or built up by the mind. It must rather be discovered or uncovered. It is a truth that is self-revealed to the spiritual endeavor, for it is there veiled in our deeper and greater self. It is the very stuff of our own spiritual consciousness, and it is by awaking to it, even in our surface self, that we have to possess it. There is an integral self-knowledge that we have to recover, and because the world self also is our self, an integral world knowledge, a knowledge that can be learned or constructed by the mind, exists and has its value. But that is not what is meant when we speak of the knowledge and the ignorance. So, I'll go through each sentence and just point out a few things. Okay? Or rather, what I'll do, he has spoken about the origin, the boundaries of the ignorance. So, what are those? We have already seen, so I just repeat them in the summary. Or no, we'll go through. So, this then is the origin, this the nature, these the boundaries of the ignorance. So, which is the origin of ignorance? The overmind plane of consciousness. That's the origin, because it is there that the multiplicity starts, and multiplicity implies separation of consciousness. Okay? The one starts becoming the many at the overmind level. It is a region of knowledge, but it is also a region of the beginning of multiplicity. Therefore, that's the origin of ignorance.
But it must not be so great.
No, it's much less, of course. There is a lot of knowledge, but it is not the complete knowledge.
Right.
The complete knowledge is in the supermind.
Right.
This is the nature. These the boundaries of the ignorance. So what are the boundaries of the ignorance? The inconscient, all the planes above, vital, mind, and all the spiritual planes, right up to the overmind level. Then also the circumconscient and the intraconscient also is the boundary of the ignorance. Okay. Its origin, the origin of ignorance, is a limitation of knowledge. Mind you, he is saying it's a limitation of knowledge. Its distinctive character, a separation of the being from its own integrality and entire reality. So we have described this. He has described in great detail in the chapter the triple status of the supermind. So I'll briefly refer to it so that you have a clear idea of what he means by separation of the being. Okay, so the triple status supermind, the first status is a oneness. If you think of it as a sea, it's a sea which is calm, no ripple at all, and only the oneness is there. There is no two, there is no waves. Waves will imply multiplicity. Waves will imply a difference, but there is only oneness. There is absolutely a flat oneness. The second level of the status of the supermind is the waves begin to form. Now, if a human being experiences the first plane of consciousness, the first status, he is aware only of oneness. The world doesn't exist for him, nothing else exists except this oneness. It's a transcendental consciousness. Only the divine, no world. There is no world at all. In the second one, if you experience the second level, it is the realization that you are separate from the origin. You are a wave of the ocean. So you realize that you are a wave, but you are not the ocean. You are the ocean only at level 1. At level 2, you are very much a part of the ocean. But I also have a personality of my own. That's the second status of the supermind. The third status of the supermind, the wave now is more conscious of itself than the ocean. the sense of oneness is slowly put into the background, and your own individual consciousness is more real to you than that one. Clear?
No.
No. Okay.
How can it be that the most important part of the supermind, if it's
These are the statuses. These are the movements which are there, but they are all in the supermind. The separation has not started occurring. You are more conscious of the individuality than the separation.
okay?
Okay? So, it is all right. I'll put it another way. Okay. An individual is one who is limited, has got features. You are so tall, you have 2 hands, you have knowledge, you have this, you have that, you are inclined to it. You have got features. Okay? So, let's compare that to a grain of sand, a grain of salt. Okay? That's the personality. It's got features, it's got weight, it's got color. Okay? That's a personality. But if you put this grain of salt in water, the features have disappeared. There is now only, but the individuality is not lost. It is the saltiness still remains. The saltiness is the essence of the ocean. So that's the first one. In the second one, for any one reason, the grain of salt has started forming. And the grain of salt still knows that it is part of the sea. In the third one, the grain of salt is more conscious of itself than the ocean. Okay? So that's a triple status of supermind. Now when you come down to from the triple status of supermind to the overmind, the grain of salt, the individual has only a faint remembrance of the oneness. It's not a living reality. But the multiplicity has started. That's why in the overmind consciousness, it's all the gods exist there in the overmind consciousness. The gods exist in multiplicity. Okay? And there are millions and millions of gods, it is said. And that's because the multiplicity is million. So the origin is the ignorance of the overmind. The overmind is the origin of ignorance. Okay, so its distinctive character is separation of being from its own integrality and entire reality. Its boundaries are determined by this separative development of the consciousness. Separation starts from the origin. You have separated yourself. Just like our body has separated itself from universal matter. It's a part of matter, but it is forgotten that it is part of matter. Okay, so are determined. Its boundaries are determined by this separative development of the consciousness, for it shuts us to our true self. The true self is the ocean, the oneness, and to the true self and the whole nature of things, and obliges us to live in an apparent surface existence. So the apparent surface existence is your body-mind life. So you are limited to your body-mind life. Now, a return or a progress to integrality, a disappearance of the limitation, a breaking down of separativeness, an overpassing of boundaries, a recovery of our essential and whole reality must be the sign and opposite character of the inner turn towards knowledge. There must be a replacement of a limited and separative by an essential and integral consciousness, identified with the original truth and the whole truth of self and existence. The integral knowledge is something that is already there in the integral reality. So, the reality is there, and the way to know that reality is knowledge, but that also is inbuilt into the reality. It's not absent, it's there. We have to only reach it. It's like a door is there closed, but the key is hanging just there. It's available. You have to only take the key and do it. It's not that the key is not there. The key is there. Knowledge is the key. Okay. It is not a new or still non-existent thing that has to be created. The knowledge itself is contained in the reality. It is a still non-existent thing that has to be created, acquired, learned, invented, or built up by the mind. So, which is that knowledge which is new, non-existent thing that has to be created, acquired, learned, invented, or built up by the mind? It's the scientific knowledge, the knowledge of the senses. That has to be acquired, learned, just like science is doing. Okay? Invented. You have to either learn it or invent it and build up by the mind. It must rather be discovered or uncovered. The integral reality is only to be discovered. Oh, the key is there. Okay? It is already there, it has to be discovered. It's a truth that is self-revealed to a spiritual endeavor. So if you make the effort, the truth will be revealed to you. For it is there veiled in our deeper and greater self. It is the very stuff of our own spiritual consciousness. And it is by awaking to it, even in our surface self, that we have to possess it. What is the surface self? Body, vital, mind. That we have to possess. Even here we have to possess it. There is an integral self-knowledge that we have to recover. And because the world self also is our self, an integral world knowledge. So what is this world knowledge? Integral knowledge? Knowledge of yourself, inwardly. And the knowledge of the world, inward and outward. These two you have to learn. A knowledge that can be learned or constructed by the mind exists and has its value. This is the knowledge of the physical world, okay? What science is trying to discover. But that is not what is meant when we speak of the knowledge and the ignorance. So it's not a knowledge that we have to acquire. It's a knowledge that has to be discovered only. It is there, you have to discover it. It is not a knowledge of the senses. It's a knowledge of the soul, the self. Now, with this background, I read a summary, very short summary, then it will become clear. The origin of ignorance is overmind. The nature of the ignorance is a purposeful self-limitation of knowledge. It's a self-limitation of knowledge. It is knowledge, but self-limitation and purposeful. Okay? The boundaries of the ignorance are defined as the areas where separation from the totality of existence occurs. That's the inconscient, subconscient, intraconscient, a bit of the superconscient also, and the environmental consciousness, circumconscient. These are the fields of the boundaries of the ignorance. Beyond the overmind is the boundaries of ignorance are gone. Okay, so the return to knowledge means the removal of barriers of division, the recovery of the totality, the possession of truth and integrality, both in essence and in entirety. This integral knowledge is already there in our consciousness. It is not something new to be sought, invented and built. It has to be unveiled by discovery. It has to be uncovered and revealed by spiritual effort. Thus, we must repossess self-knowledge and world knowledge. This is what he said. We read the second paragraph.
Yes.
An integral spiritual consciousness carries in it a knowledge of all the terms of being. It links the highest to the lowest through all the mediating terms and achieves an indivisible whole. So, we'll go sentence by sentence. Integral spiritual consciousness carries in it a knowledge of all the terms of being. Which are the terms of being? Inconscient, subconscient, matter, life, mind, all the planes of the superconscient, okay, higher mind, deliberate mind, intuitive mind, overmind, the intraconscient as well as the circumconscient. These are the terms of being. So we have to know all these. Then that would be the integral knowledge. It links the highest to the lowest. Which is the highest? The unmanifest, the fourth, featureless, The mind can never know it. Only the consciousness can know it, not the mind. From the mind level, you can never know it. But you go to that itself, it reveals itself. It's not a light that you have to discover. You have to enter into the light.
So in the supermind, you cannot know it?
Supermind, you cannot know by the mind. But the supermind consciousness itself tells you, I am this.
Okay.
Okay, so at the highest summit of things, it opens to the reality. Ineffable. There you are. If it is knowable by the mind, it is knowable. But ineffable means cannot be put into words. Therefore, to the mind it is ineffable. It is known only to itself. So you have to become that consciousness. At the highest summit of things, it opens to reality. Ineffable, because superconscient to all but its own self-awareness of the Absolute. At the lowest end of our being, it perceives the inconscience from which our evolution begins. But at the same time, it is aware of the One and all, self-involved in those depths. It unveils the secret consciousness of the inconscience, interpretative, revelatory, moving between these two extremes. Its vision discovers the manifestation of the One in the many, the identity of the infinite in the disparity of things finite, the presence of the timeless eternal in eternal time. It is this seeing that illumines for it the meaning of the universe. This consciousness does not abolish the universe. It takes it up and transforms it by giving to it its hidden significance. It does not abolish the individual existence. It transforms the individual being and nature by revealing to them their true significance and enabling them to overcome their separateness from the divine reality and the divine nature. So I'll read the summary, and if there is still something, we'll look at each sentence. This total spiritual consciousness has the knowledge of all the elements of existence, from the highest to the lowest. And what are they? The 7 planes of consciousness. Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda, mind, life, matter. So all these, that's a integral knowledge. It links the two extremes, poles, with the aid of the other intermediate principles. So the highest and the lowest are linked by the chain of all the intermediaries. This is something that the Buddhism does not say, and that the Mayavadins don't say. They say they are two separate. But Chandra is saying, no, they are connected. There is an important difference. Okay, so at the highest level is a superconscious, which is ineffable to us because it knows itself by itself. The mind cannot know it. At the lowest is the inconscience, from which the evolution commences. But the integral spiritual knowledge sees the One and the all self-involved in that tenebrous inconscient. The evolution is nothing but the unveiling. It's okay, I am reading summary. The evolution is nothing but the unveiling and revealing of the involved secret superconscious. This total knowledge moves between the two extremes and reveals and interprets. Interprets what? The One in the many, the One infinite in all the many finites, the timeless in time, the status in the dynamism. It is this involvement of the spirit in matter that gives meaning and purpose to the universe. The Buddhists and the Mayavadins don't agree with this. They say there is no meaning in the universe. It is an illusion. It is constant movement. It has no value. Okay. The Supreme does not abolish the universe. It takes it up and transforms it and gives meaning and purpose to existence in the world. The world is meaningful, it's a field of experience for the soul. Okay? Neither does it abolish the individual, it transforms it into a universal being by ridding it of ego, desire and attachment and raising it to perfection. It enables the limited ego-bound individual to become the infinite vast divine. This is what Swami is saying in the second para. Okay. So these key sentences I will read and tell you who is saying that. Okay, so he is saying, it's a very small para, I will read each one. An integral spiritual consciousness carries in it a knowledge of all the terms of being. Yeah, it's okay. Of all the terms of our being, the 7 planes of consciousness. It links the highest to the lowest through all the mediating terms and achieves an indivisible whole. They, as I said, the Buddhists and the Mayavadins don't agree with this. They say the two are different and the intermediate planes are nothing. They are not helpful in that way. At the highest summit of things, it opens to the reality, ineffable because superconscient to all, but its own self-awareness of the Absolute. At the lowest end of our being, it perceives the inconscience from which our evolution begins. So, it sees the inconscience, but it also sees that all the other planes are involved in the inconscient. Our evolution begins from there. But at the same time, it is aware of the one and the all, self-involved in those depths. It unveils the secret consciousness in the inconscience. Interpretative, revelatory, moving between these two extremes, its vision discovers the manifestation of the one in the many. So, the one in the many is seen in the, not in the Mayavada philosophy, nor the Buddhist philosophy. You are seeing the one in the many means you are seeing the divine presence in everything in the world. So that is the Gita and Sri Aurobindo's and also the Advaita philosophy. You see the reality hiding behind the forms. Okay, so interpretative, revelatory, moving between these two extremes, its vision discovers the manifestation of the one in the many, the identity of the infinite in the disparity of things, finite. So, the infinite is there supporting the finite. That's what he's saying. Okay, so he has said this many times in the past, but in different words. Okay, so this consciousness, it is the seeing that illumines for it the meaning of the universe. So when you don't see the infinite in the finite, there is no meaning in the universe. The finite is something transient and no value. But if you see the infinite, the divine presence in the form, then there is a purpose to the universe. And that purpose is a field of evolution. Okay, so the presence of the timeless eternal in eternal time. So when you are in eternal time, you also see the timeless there in it. It is the seeing that illumines for it the meaning of the universe. This consciousness does not abolish the universe. The
takes it up.
Shankaran philosophy, you can say, but also the Mayavada philosophy, the universe disappears because it is unreal. Okay, so this consciousness actually does not abolish the universe, nor does it abolish the individual existence. The Buddhists say there is no soul, there is no individual existence. It's a fiction of your imagination. There is only the infinite vast. So, Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is different from that, and he conforms to the Advaita philosophy. Okay, the Vedanta. It does not abolish the individual existence. It transforms the individual being and nature by revealing to them their true significance and enabling them to overcome their separateness from the divine reality and the divine nature. The individual, with all his finiteness, loses his ego, loses his finiteness, and becomes one with the divine nature. Okay. We read the summary. Now we can go to the third para. Okay? Now, what is this integral knowledge? An integral knowledge presupposes an integral reality. For it is the power. When you read the sentence, what is he saying actually, you wonder. But if you know the Mayavada philosophy and the Buddhistic philosophy, you will understand what he is saying. The Buddhists say an integral knowledge presupposes an integral reality. There is no question of integral reality. There is only one reality, and that's the Brahman. So, what is this question of integral reality? You will wonder. So, when Srindu says this, he is opposing this sentence to the Buddhistic view and the Mayavadic view. Okay? There is a reality which is integral. The others are saying no. All this is not knowledge at all. It is just unreality. So there is no question of integral reality for them. Okay? For it is the power of a truth consciousness. Now, when Srivda uses the word truth consciousness, he always means the supermind. He always means the supermind, the third level. Okay? Level 1, ignorance. Level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness. Level 3, the supermind, or what the Gita calls the Purushottama consciousness or the Ishvara consciousness. Okay? Where all the dualities are resolved. Personal, impersonal, action, status, okay? The infinite and the finite, they are all compatible with each other at the third level. Okay, so for it's a power of the truth consciousness which is itself the consciousness of the reality. But our idea and sense of reality vary with our status and movement of consciousness, its sight, its stress, its intake of things. That sight or stress can be intensive and exclusive or extensive. Now, we'll look at this a little carefully. So, Srivda is saying the reality is one, but your seeing of the reality depends at which level of consciousness you are stationed. So, if you are stationed at one level, your knowledge can be intense and exclusive. So, intense and exclusive means intense and excludes all the rest. It's a transcendent consciousness. It's a consciousness in which, as Srivda uses different words, he says the divine in himself, not the divine in the world. The divine in himself, only the divine. So, this is what he means by intensive and exclusive. Or it is extensive and inclusive. So, extensive and inclusive and comprehensive, it includes the cosmos. So, you are aware of the transcendent and the cosmos. Okay? The divine presence in the cosmos. It is quite possible, and it is in its own field, a valid movement for our thought and for a very high line of spiritual achievement, to affirm the existence of the ineffable absolute, to emphasize its sole reality, and to negate and abolish for ourselves.
To expunge?
It's quite possible, and it's our own field, a valid movement of our thought, but very high, to affirm the existence of the ineffable absolute, to emphasize its sole reality, and to negate and abolish for ourselves, to expunge from our idea and sense of reality the individual being and the cosmic creation. So what Srivda is saying is, you are experiencing only the divine reality without the cosmos and the individual. It is valid, it is good, he is saying. It has a value. That is very necessary. You have to know what the transcendent is. Okay? So he is supporting the Buddhistic view, but it's not the whole truth. Okay? So he is saying it is very, very important to know that. Okay? So, and he is calling it a very high line of spiritual achievement. To know only the divine in himself, the transcendent, is a very high line of spiritual achievement. to affirm the existence of the ineffable Absolute, to emphasize its sole reality without the world, and to negate and abolish for ourselves, to expunge from our idea and sense of reality the individual being and the cosmic creation. Very clear? The experience of the transcendent has got a deep value. That's what he's saying. The reality of the individual is Brahman, the Absolute. The reality of the cosmos is Brahman, the Absolute. That is the reason why the experience of the transcendent is very necessary. Okay? The individual is a phenomenon. Now, what does it mean by phenomenon? A temporal appearance in the cosmos. A phenomenon is the opposite of a static reality. A reality that is permanent and eternal without change. But the phenomenon, the individual is a phenomenon. He is constantly changing and disappears also ultimately. A temporal appearance in the cosmos. The cosmos itself is also a phenomenon. A larger and more complex temporal appearance. It's larger than the individual, and yet it is also a phenomenon. The world is going on changing. It's not the same at any 2 points of time. The two terms, knowledge and ignorance, belong only to this appearance. Okay? When you say knowledge and ignorance, you are talking only of cosmos and the individual. Okay? In order to reach an absolute superconsciousness, both have to be transcended. Ego consciousness and cosmic consciousness are extinguished in that supreme transcendence, and there remains only the Absolute. So, this is what the Isha Upanishad says. The Isha Upanishad says that when you are in our normal consciousness, you are in ignorance. But when you go out of your body-mind life and realize the self, you are supposed to be in knowledge. But that knowledge only, if you say that that's the ultimate reality, then that is an ignorance which is even worse than the ignorance below. You have to go to the third level and see that what you are calling ignorance and knowledge, both are real. That's what he is saying. He is repeating the Isha Upanishad. He is reiterating the truth of the Isha Upanishad. For the absolute Brahman exists only in its own identity and is beyond all other knowledge. There, the very idea of the knower and the known, and therefore of the knowledge in which they meet and become one, disappears, is transcended, and loses its validity, so that to mind and speech, the absolute Brahman must always remain unattainable. To mind and speech, mind you. The consciousness can go there. In opposition to the view we have put forward, or in completion of it, the view of the ignorance itself as only either a limited or an involved action of the divine knowledge, limited in the partly conscient, involved in the inconscient, we might say from this other end of the scale of things that knowledge itself is only a higher ignorance, since it stops short of the absolute reality which is self-evident to itself, but to mind unknowable. So, this absolutism corresponds to a truth of thought and to a truth of supreme experience in the spiritual consciousness. But by itself, it is not the whole of spiritual thought, complete and comprehensive, and it does not exhaust the possibilities of the supreme spiritual experience. So here he is implying the three levels of existence. Level 1, you are bound to your ego and your body-mind life. You are in ignorance. Level 2, you are not bound by your body-mind life and ego, and you go to the level of consciousness where you feel that now you are in knowledge. You are seeing the one, and you feel that the lower ignorance is a field of no value, and this is the only one. But if you insist that that's the only reality, you are again in some sort of ignorance, and you have to go to the third level where what you are calling knowledge and ignorance both disappear, and you see that there is only knowledge which is slowly diminishing itself and plunging itself into the inconscience. This is what he is saying. Okay. And that is possible only at the supreme spiritual experience. That's the third level, the supermind. Okay? Now, I'll read the summary. Okay, it will give a good idea. We are discussing reality. There is a reality and there is a consciousness that experiences it. So there is a reality and there is a consciousness that experiences it. Like the key at the door. Okay, so. And it yields knowledge. Therefore, an integral knowledge implies an integral reality. But man's concept of reality depends upon his position in the scale of existence. So, where does man stand? And from there, his sense of reality goes on changing. So, this knowledge can be intensive and exclusive, absolute. What is that? It's the knowledge of the transcendent. It's an inward looking consciousness and it's called Chit Ghana. Chit Ghana means the consciousness concentrating only on itself, not interested in anything else. That's a transcendent. Compare it to a black hole. Everything is going inwards, nothing is going out. So that's a transcendent. Nothing else exists except the divine. Okay? Or that knowledge can be extensive and inclusive, sometimes use the words. So it is going outwards. One is a concentration, one is an expansion. So, and what is that expansion? The cosmic consciousness. I know what you are. I know what that is. I know what everything is. So let's say inward going and outward going. Okay, sir. Extensive outwards, awareness of the physical world and all. Inclusive and comprehensive is the supermind, the awareness of the one and the many. So these are the terms he has used. Okay, so therefore it is possible that in the self, the world is seen as unreal and lets us emphasize that this experience is quite valid for that level. At whichever level you are, that knowledge, whether it's half knowledge or semi-knowledge or quarter knowledge, it is valid for that level. Okay? That you see when you go to the highest level. The reality of the individual is Brahman. The reality of the cosmos is Brahman. But both are phenomenal, transient forms. Knowledge and ignorance both belong to the phenomenal world. So to go to the absolute, we have to transcend both knowledge as well as ignorance. And that happens when we have gone beyond in the absolute. Knower, known and knowledge are all one single unit. Therefore, the absolute remains unknowable to the human mind. Because so long as you are in the human mind, there is a subject and an object. But subject and object become one at the highest level. So there is no question of knowledge. You are yourself, what is the reality? Okay? In the integral view, ignorance is really knowledge limiting and diminishing itself gradually, ending in the inconscience. Okay? The opposite or the Vedantic view is that the world of multiplicity is ignorance. This is part of the Vedanta, part of it. Okay, so what is Mayavada philosophy? Is ignorance. The self, the Atman, is the knowledge in that view. In the Mayavada philosophy, that's the view. Okay, so you have to call it the earlier Vedanta and the later Vedanta. The later Vedanta is what sees the ignorance and the knowledge. But the earlier Vedanta did not. It saw only oneness everywhere. Okay, so if we want the absolute, self-involved, excluding all else, both ignorance and knowledge must be overpassed because both belong to the lower hemisphere. The absolute self-concentration is one aspect of truth and it can be thought of as well as experienced, but it's not the only truth. There is a plane where one and the many coexist in perfect harmony. There, all the contraries are harmonized and become complementarities. That's a supermind. This absolutist view of reality, which is that only the Brahman is real, the world is not. Okay, that's an absolutist view. Consciousness and knowledge is founded on one side of the earliest Vedantic thought. There you are, see, earliest Vedantic thought. In the inspired scripture of the most ancient Vedanta, we find the affirmation of the absolute, the experience concept, note that, experience and concept of the utter and ineffable transcendence. But we find also, not in contradiction to it, but as its corollary, the affirmation of the cosmic divinity, an experience concept of the cosmic self and the becoming of Brahman in the universe. Equally, we find the affirmation of the divine reality in the individual. This too is an experience concept. It is seized upon not as an appearance but as an actual becoming. In place of a sole, supreme, exclusive affirmation negating all else than the transcendent absolute, we find a comprehensive affirmation carried to its farthest conclusion. This concept of reality and of knowledge, enveloping in one view the cosmic and the absolute, coincides fundamentally with our own. So they are saying my view is the same as the earlier Vedanta, okay, not the later Vedanta. The later Vedanta makes a difference. The world is unreal. In the earlier Vedanta, the world is not unreal. It's part of the whole. Okay, so of our own means my own. Okay, of our own view. For it implies that the ignorance too is a half-veiled part of the knowledge and world knowledge, a part of self-knowledge. The Isha Upanishad insists on the unity and reality of all the manifestations of the Absolute. It refuses to confine truth to any one aspect. Brahman is the stable and the mobile, the internal and the external, all that is near and all that is far, whether spiritually or in the extension of time and space. He is actually almost quoting the Isha Upanishad. It is far and it is near. It is inside and it is outside. So that's the inclusive part. That's the earlier Vedanta. That's why Sri Aurobindo has got one whole volume on the Isha Upanishad. And all the other Upanishads, translations are all packed into one volume. Only the Isha Upanishad is a separate volume. So much importance it gives because it says that. Okay? So, Brahman is a stable and a mobile. It's both. Normally it is thought that Brahman is only the stable, but it's also the mobile. The internal and the external, all that is near and all that is far, whether spiritually or in the extension of time and space. It is the being of all becomings, the pure and silent who is without feature or action, and the seer and thinker who organizes the world and its objects. It is the one who becomes all that we are sensible of in the universe, the immanent, and that in which he takes up his dwelling. The Upanishad affirms the perfect and the liberating knowledge to be that which excludes neither the self nor its creations. The liberated spirit sees all these as becomings of the self-existent in an internal vision and by consciousness which perceives the universe within itself, instead of looking out on it like the limited and egoistic mind as a thing other than itself. To live in the cosmic ignorance is a blindness, but to confine oneself in an exclusive absolutism of knowledge is also a blindness. To know Brahman as at once and together the knowledge and the ignorance, to attain to the supreme status at once by the becoming and the non-becoming, to relate together realization of the transcendent and the cosmic self, to achieve foundation in the supramundane and a self-aware manifestation in the mundane is the integral knowledge. We'll do this next time in detail. That is the possession of immortality. It is this whole consciousness with its complete knowledge that builds the foundation of the life divine and makes its attainment possible. It follows that the absolute reality of the Absolute must be not a rigid, indeterminable oneness, not an infinite vacant of all that is not a pure self-existence, attainable only by the exclusion of the many and finite, but something which is beyond these definitions, beyond indeed any description, either positive or negative. All affirmations and negations are expressive of its aspects, and it is through both a supreme affirmation and a supreme negation that we can arrive at the absolute. So what he's saying is that everything is the divine, in very short. The other philosophies are saying the world is not divine. It is something imposed upon you, an illusion that is thrust upon your consciousness. Forget it. But simply saying, no, everything is the divine.
Okay.
Even that which seems to be the opposite,
Yeah.
negative, that also is divine. We'll do this next time in detail.
Next time, yes.